want to talk about evangelistic efforts for a minute, and we're going to compare two very real examples of it. So I'll give you the bad one first. This one I saw on YouTube a while back. There was a video claiming great evangelistic success. Woman makes stunning revelations or has stunning revelations about God or something like that was the title. So I watched the video, and on it, a zealous evangelistic type had a pre-planned, well-rehearsed script that he went through with people. And he found this unsuspecting young woman, probably on a college campus somewhere, and went through his script with her. You have to keep in mind that he had done this 100 times, probably more, hundreds of times, and she was completely unsuspecting. So she was not a fiery activist type. She was just some young woman going to college or something like that. So basically, he progressed so quickly through his assertions of God because he knew exactly what he was going to say. He had a canned reply ready for any response. So he basically went through it, and nothing caught him by surprise. And he knew exactly what he was going to say the whole time. And he'd done it 100 times before. And the young woman was so surprised that she was just like, oh, yeah, okay, right. Yeah, I suppose so. Uh-huh, sure. Okay, great. But do you see what was happening there? All that happened, because she didn't have time to think about it. She hadn't been through the conversation hundreds of times like he had. Basically, she got railroaded and coerced into just agreeing with the guy. It was a classic case of manipulation. And what you can see through this when you start to live with God, and just, sometimes just the older you get and the more experience you get, you can see this kind of stuff. You're like, that was a classic case of manipulation right there. She was coerced into agreeing with this guy. And then the video claimed great evangelistic success. I have news for you. That is anything but. That lady, when she gets older and more mature, she's going to look back on that and she's going to go, oh, that guy totally manipulated me, railroaded me, and just shoved that stuff down my throat in the name of Jesus, in the name of God, and it'll turn her from him. That is anything but evangelistic success. I want to go back and find that guy and tell him exactly what I think. That's ridiculous. So that's not what we want to be doing. Now let's compare this. I want to compare that to my favorite evangelistic story in the Bible. There are tons of evangelistic stories in the Bible, especially Jesus, where he evangelized people. Of course, he was always successful, right? Working in absolute love like he did. He never got it wrong. But my favorite one is from the Old Testament. And it's a prime example of how love is the pure, perfect evangelistic tool as well. It's the story of Ruth and Naomi. If you're not familiar with it, Naomi was a Hebrew woman married to a guy named Elimelech. There was a famine in the land of Judah where they lived, or Israel. So they moved to Moab. Okay? Apparently there was food in Moab. But you have to understand, Moab was a forbidden country. It was a forbidden race. God had said earlier in the Bible, when the Israelis were going into the promised land, don't marry the Moabites, for their daughters will turn your sons to their gods and away from me. Don't do it. So Moabite women were strictly forbidden for intermarriage for the Israelis. Okay? So Elimelech, with his wife and his 2 sons, moves to Moab where there's food. It's a setup. You can kind of see the problem here. Sure enough, his 2 sons each marry Moabite women. That's nature in action, right? Men are going to be men and they're going to marry women as long as there are men and women, right? It's just the way it goes. So eventually the story progresses and Elimelech, the guy, he dies. And his 2 sons also die. So you've basically got the 3 women left. You've got the guy's wife, Naomi, and you have the 2 daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. They're just left and they're living in Moab. Naomi, for whatever reason, decides at this point she's heading home to Israel or Judah, wherever they lived. Bethlehem. So it was Judah. So she's like, I'm going home, man. My husband and my sons are dead. I'm going back to my family, right? Logical. So she tells her daughters-in-law, you guys stay. You were great. Go back to your family, to your gods, to your country, all that kind of stuff. Orpah, one of them, she's like, well, at first, both of them were like, no, we want to come with you. But Naomi really tries to convince them, and Orpah, one of them, decides to stay finally. But Ruth, on the other hand, she decides to go. And she does. She goes back to Bethlehem with Naomi, even against Naomi's. Well, Naomi had already tried to get her to stay. But Ruth looks at Naomi and she says this. She goes, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. This from a woman from the banned race of the Moabites. One of the women that God himself said, these women will turn your sons against me. Right? So, how did this happen? That was a case where she voluntarily chose Naomi's God. There was no manipulation. There was no coercion. There was no aggressive evangelistic efforts. What was there? There was love. Because Naomi loved Ruth. Like Naomi just loved her well, as a good mother-in-law should. And that love so impacted Ruth that she chose Naomi's God. She said, hey, I don't need you to try to convince me. I don't need a tract. I don't need to watch a television show. I can see the love of your God in your eyes. I choose him. Now you compare that with the story I told you about the pushy evangelist out on the street with the young woman. Which one is legit? Which one is really, truly God, and which one produces the real results that we're after? Love does. Manipulation does not. Thank you and have a nice day.